webinar on use of thermal drones in wildlife survey and protection with case studies from Germany and beyond. I'm delighted to welcome Frank Zabel and Tobias Dahms, who are calling in from Germany today. I'm calling in from Scotland to talk to you today about the work that they're doing. Just a brief introduction, and then I'm going to hand over to our speakers. So Frank Zabel is a self-described red deer enthusiast, which he shows through a lot of his work. He's the host of Germany's oldest and largest podcast on wildlife biology and hunting, and he's also the editor of a magazine all about red deer. And I met Frank when he was doing his MSc based at Edinburgh Napier University, and we worked together on using drone-mounted thermal imaging to count red deer, which Frank is going to talk about, and was based on some work he'd done previously. And I later found out that the technology that Frank was using was from Thermal Drones, a company set up by Tobias, who's also one of our speakers. So Tobias is a landscape ecologist interested in nature, technology, and ethics, and he founded this company, Thermal Drones, in 2020, based on sort of years of surveying experience. He's also very enthusiastic about peatlands, which is highly relevant to a UK context. And another sort of tool in his toolkit is he has founded a company called Ecosm, which is developing Internet of Things, low-cost technologies to monitor things like water level and climate variables in peatlands. So that's how I know Frank and Tobias. I'm an applied ecologist and researcher at Centre for Conservation and Restoration Science at Edinburgh Napier University. And I'm particularly interested in evidence-based good practice, whether that's camera traps, drones, or more traditional techniques. So just a couple of things I've put up here to remind myself to say about. So for the first one is that, the reason we organized this webinar was in the spirit of knowledge exchange. So SIEM is a UK organization, but I think we can learn a lot by collaboration and conversation with our international colleagues and vice versa. And I think that's really critical. The title of the webinar, maybe some of the younger people might be wondering about, but there's a sort of play on words from Audi's advertising slogan that sort of came out in the 80s. And in case you're wondering what it means, Vorsprung, Technik, I probably have said that completely wrong. It translates as progress through technology, which I think is highly apt in the world of ecology today. I think there's an opportunity now to use new technologies and tools to make progress against the biodiversity crisis and climate crises. But obviously we need to develop a much deeper understanding about these technologies, how they work, and how to get the most out of them. So I'm going to hand over now to our first speaker, Frank, who's going to talk about his work, particularly relating to deer.
Well, welcome also from my side. I'm very delighted to speak here today. And so I can now share my screen with you. And actually, I have learned everything about the deployment of drones from Tobias. So we could already now hand over to him, but maybe to give you a slightly different perspective on the topic, I have two case studies for you. And we'll go now to presentation mode. Just a sec, please. Do you see the slides now? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so my first case study is related to the fawn rescue, and this is also the way how I got in touch with the deployment of drones, because I have a short table of content for the first case study, and first we will briefly touch up on the point why we do search and rescue roe deer fawns, and in fact not only roe deer fawns. how we find them, and then given we have time, we can also look a bit into what we do after we have spotted them with the deployment of drones, because when it's of course about to catch them. But I will keep this very brief. And if you would like to have a deeper look into this topic later on, then we can spend an hour or two to really go to it step by step. But for today, it's about the deployment of the drones. Therefore, a quick run through this the following steps, and afterwards we will look into a case study where we deployed the drones for counting red deer, so large land-based ungulates. So hide and seek. Why do we do this? And the roe deer, but also fallow deer and other ungulates have developed a very successful strategy over the last tens of thousands of years. So their fawns or calves hide in meadows with high grass and high vegetation. They hardly expose any odors, and so they were quite safe through this strategy in meadows. But at a certain point in time, we developed also humans settled and become farmers, and with the increasing industrialization of farming, this strategy has become quite lethal, because they still try to hide, but in an environment where the rotary mover cuts the grass on sometimes 11 to 13 meters width, and not seldom with more than 30 kilometers per hour. So you don't have to lay on the meadow to get in big trouble. Even if you try to run away, that's quite a challenge. So I have now some quite cruel images, so who doesn't want to see them, then please close your eyes for a short moment. I will tell you when it's over, because I think it's important to see the consequences of what is happening in the meadows. So this is what happens, and often, to be honest, this is the most human cause, because not seldom the rotary mover just cuts off the legs, and the fawns still survive. And there's one more, so it's not too early to open the eyes. And the sad balance is there are just rough estimates, but it is estimated that at least 100,000 fawns are more or less killed, seriously harmed by this during per year alone in Germany. And this is just a rough estimate and doesn't factor in the other animals which live and breed within the meadows. So I hope I was correct with just me sneak peek. Yeah, you can open your eyes again. So for a couple of years, in particular, hunters when walked through the meadows to try to find the fawns, but this had proven to be very unreliable. So at a certain point, I think people around the colleague from Tobias, Dr. Martin Israel, had the idea to deploy thermal imaging technology. And first, they hold it with an angle in front of them, but in the mid-2010s, I think it was that they then came to the conclusion that we could deploy the cameras with drones. And this is actually what we do quite commonly in certain areas of Germany nowadays. So we deploy the drones, and we usually meet during the early mornings, and then in alignment with the farmers, fly over the meadows which are up for moving at a certain day. And the aim here is that you see now the default thermal image from a camera setting which has a resolution of 640 times 480 pixel and a camera angle of 34 degrees. So with such a setup, we can fly around 80 meters high. And here we actually see two fawns, the heat signature of two fawns. And I think it's also the image quality was improved by a technology which Tobias will later explain for you, I'm certain. And then we fly also during the mornings to have the highest possible temperature difference between the meadow and the fawns. So it makes it easier to spot them, and not seldom the farmer also wants to start moving once the sun is up. So when we look at the camera setting, then we always have to bear in mind that we just see we have high vegetation. That's the reason why the lawn is moved, or the meadow is moved. The hay is it's usually not the hay, it's actually the grass which is harvested to feed cows, or and later in the spring, then of course people also make hay. So the same applies to both. You have high vegetation, you have the fawns and the calves which hide motionless on the ground, and you kind of have you have to, if you look too wide, when you simply just look on grass, and you can't trust the heat image. So you can only use a certain angle of your camera. That's important to bear in mind. Otherwise, you will have losses and don't understand why it happened. So if you don't factor in vegetation height and camera angle, then you kind of lose fawns in the dead angle. Just that you know, if you have a vegetation of a meter height, then it's just the effective camera angle, which is, Tobias, was it actually the 17 degrees, right? Yeah, okay. You're mute, but that's a clear yes. Sorry, I'm now. So, but now just very quickly, it's not done with finding the animals. In certain cases, it actually is, if you have very large meadows, and in certain parts of Germany, you have extraordinarily large meadows with 50, 60, 70 and more hectares. But usually you can't leave them where they are. So that's why we have also non-technical parts in the process. We have the so-called runners, which are actually directed from the drone operator by walkie-talkie towards the heat signature, so that they can catch the fawns during the early days of a season. They are they are actually motionless during the entire process, but at a certain moment in time they run away. That's why they have this catcher, that's the fun part. I mean, these are the people which really have to walk a lot. When you look at the structured flight path of a drone, you start at the bottom of the meadow, and here you see a heat signature. You stop the drone, and then you send the people towards the drone, the runners. They catch the fawn, they bring it into the shade so that it can remain the whole there and doesn't overheat. Then the drone continues. You have a next signature. You send the runners up there, and it's a lot of action for the runners, but they also are rewarded by handling the tiny fawns. And I can just recommend to do it because it makes what is süchtig, addicted, and that you get a short impression on what we have here. I will. Yeah, here it is. Now you see. Do you see the movie? Yeah. That's an example from the Corona period. So a friend of mine just picks up the phone, and then we put it into in custody, and then the phone is carried into the shade. And after the meadow has been moved and the work has been finished, when we release the animals at almost the same place if possible. I told you during the early season they are hardly move, even during custody they hardly change their position. In the later season it's different when you really have to catch them, because they of course don't know that we want to do something good to them. That's what I skip now. It's the equipment. And these are the different forms where we can put them into custody, safe custody. So this is the Rolls-Royce, so to speak, tailor-made with balsa wood, good ventilation, but of course hard to carry. And here we have stages in between, and this is my preferred way of handling them in a pet bag. Which is of course just used for the handling of fawns and for nothing else. This, by the way, applies for the whole equipment. You never use something that you use for fawn rescue to handle dogs, cats, and the like. The roe deers and all the other ungulates are very smell sensitive, so to speak. When we put them into the shade, and even if it's for a longer period, somebody has to take care that they remain in the shade. Sun is moving, so if it's a longer period, then of course we have to look after them in the meantime. This is then the way how we release them. And again, acute. Sorry. It's a bit difficult because I have this. You still see my screen?
Jetzt. Der Herz zupackt. Oh, guck mal, es läuft schon weg.
So you have different types. These are twins. The one just runs away, and the second doesn't move at all. And my son releases her with gloves, of course. So no transfer of scent. And so, and this was actually already my first use case. Are you still with me? Apologies, I'm not used to the system, but I don't see you.
Still with you, Frank.
Okay, very good. When I go back into the presentation mode, so we have a second case study, and here Pat and I we made an assessment of counting large ungulate species, in our case red deer, Cabus elaphus, with UAV, so unmanned aerial vehicle mounted thermal infrared cameras. Apologies for the tech. So what did we do? We have published the whole thing. You can make you can. Apologies, I don't even have Apple. I'm on a Windows system. So we have published the whole thing in a paper. If you want, you can copy the DOI. But just a brief introduction. So after I used drone technology for a couple of years to rescue fawns, actually had during my studies at Napier the idea to use them to count red deer, and we have done so in my master thesis, and Pat, Mel, and I have published the whole thing later on in wildlife biology. And just to see that, how well it works, and that it even doesn't impact the animals. We have 3 images here. The first was taken at round about 8 o'clock, the second at 9 o'clock, and the third at almost 10 o'clock. And you see the same area always from a different height and view angle. But you see that the animals, in this case red deer, don't even take notice of the drone operation, which took place between 100 and 120 meters above them. So, we actually came to the conclusion that the system, and we don't talk about peat areas so we talk about an area in a river estuary with a certain level of tree cover. So of course these figures even increase if we have an area with fewer vegetation, but at certain conditions you hardly can increase the accuracy even further, because in some cases we actually had 100%. So no deviation at all. But there was a certain relation between the temperature, but nonetheless, the overall performance of the methodology had proven to be very excellent. Though the season played an important role, and this has a biological background, because the red deer have a certain, they change their metabolic activity during winter. So this is kind of a hidden Winterschlaf. So they during winter times they reduce metabolic activities. So here you see an image which was taken at January 5 in 2021. So you clearly see the animals, but later in the winter, at the end of the winter, it was almost the same area, but you had the visibility was impaired a lot due to the decreased metabolic activity. So this is important to bear in mind when it comes to the timing. To prove how accurate the whole thing is, you see here even fawns. Here we have a female red deer, and here followed by her fawn, and here you have actually 6 adult red deer and 4 fawns spread out in the surrounding. And at a certain moment in time, you can even see the antler development. Of course, you have to train your eye, but here you see a stack with growing antlers, and which also led to the result that we came to the conclusion that you best deploy the technology if you want to count deer at the peak of the antler growth related to so you have to time the growing apologies. When the vegetation kicks in during spring again, and you take the last possible moment, so to speak, before there is increasing vegetation growth, and this coincides with the antler growth. And then you have the possibility, at least for the older stacks, 2 years and older, to identify the gender. And this is quite helpful and provides you with additional insight than just the amount of deer. But you have to bear in mind that you have to take enough images, and here you see the same area, just a second apart. And when you look here, you don't see the animals in this part. And the further you get during the flight trajectory, you then see this. If you just take an image every 2 or 3 seconds, then you probably wouldn't have seen the animals hidden underneath the tree. And this is what we try to compensate with the, so to speak, overlap, so that you have a large enough overlap that you look underneath the tree, and that you compensate for the images where the animals are covered by the tree itself. So what we have also learned is the whole thing was performed with one drone, and there you have many intersections, and then it can happen that the animal moves from one flight transect to the other, and this is of course bad for the accuracy. What we want, apologies, this is very annoying, probably also for you, but what we want is that we actually decrease the amount of intersections, because then if an animal moves, then we don't have this impact. It can move from one flight transect to the other and then increase the amount of counted deer, but it can also move the other way around so that you don't catch it at all. But the more drones you deploy in parallel, the fewer intersections you have, and this is then, of course, very helpful for the accuracy. And Tobias and I have already performed such parallel flights last year here in northern Germany. And I have 1 minute left, and that's then. Thank you for your attention, and over to Tobias.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, and well done on dealing with that pop-up. You dealt with very calmly. Didn't break your flow. So yeah, and actually, yeah, just I'll hand over to Tobias in a second. I forgot to say in my introduction is that we welcome questions, and there's already been one question asked, and if you've got any questions as we go through on Frank's presentation or Tobias's, please put them in the chat in the Q&A, and then we'll go through the questions to the speakers at the end. Okay. Okay, I'll hand over to Tobias now. Thank you very much, Frank.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm also very happy to have the possibility to present here in the webinar. Thank you very much for joining. And please excuse me when I'm not so fluently and eloquent in the English language as Frank and you are. I'm Tobias, and I want to present to you some examples how our customers and partners use the software we are developing in different projects for wildlife conservation and species conservation and surveying. And I will start with a short introduction of the company. The company I have founded together with Martin Israel, and it's a spin-off of the German Aerospace Center. And based on the research of Martin, we focus on software-based detection and localization of wildlife. And especially, we are focusing on fields and meadows, because as you have seen in the presentation of Frank, there's a huge issue also for biodiversity, for animal welfare, as well as for biodiversity. And there's also a huge potential for development. And we do this together with machinery, agricultural machinery manufacturers. And we, for example, have already presented last year at the Technik and prototype where a mowing robot, larger machinery is working together with a drone to protect wildlife in the field, and how this can be managed to avoid the killing of the animal. We also, in order to finance our development, we sell drones. And yeah, so we have a lot of customers with whom we work together. And since I'm a landscape ecologist and somehow like to do a lot of things which help to save some biodiversity and animals, we are also doing a lot of work in this field and support different projects together with partners. And I want to present to you some of those activities. I will start with a short overview on our software. It's Swiss Army knife for drones, I would say, and it's a cloud-centered software solution. It does not need the cloud, but it helps a lot. And it connects basically all different segments when you work with drone image data. You have the things which Frank already told you. I don't know whether, can you see my pointer? Or do I? I try this one.
Yeah.
So
I see it, yeah.
We can
yeah,
see
you
it.
see. Spotlight. Oh, that was not good. No, I let it. Okay, so we have this desktop software which does image analysis also with artificial intelligence, and which has different image algorithms. We have a connection to your remote controller, which connects the remote controller to share location data of different things you find either directly with the drone or with your with the Poise Studio software on your desktop. And we have a connections to a smartphone app where you can which you can use to record data and to walk to the points you found with the software, the other parts of the software. And we also can transfer data, which is mainly location data and image data, to other software such as GIS, etc. So, but I will bring it up in examples so that you have a better impression, hopefully. Before I start, I want to give a short overview over the drone models and what they, the capabilities and which are important for this kind of work. So it's very clear that you need a thermal imaging camera. Without it, it's very hard to do this work and almost impossible with some examples. And currently there are the typical resolution, which Frank already told you, is about 640 to 512 pixels. But there's now newly available even a 4 times larger resolution camera from DJI, which is also very interesting now for work where you have a lot of budget, of course, but you gain efficiency and information, and for some projects that will be very interesting. What is also very important and helpful is a good optical zoom camera on your drone. Those DJI drones have them, and if you go with the small drone, then you have a 7 times optical zoom, and it goes up to 34. And yeah, that helps a lot to identify species, etc. You also have with the largest drone a near infrared illumination. So when you work in a low light situation, which is also the case because you need to go early in the morning to detect those animals, then this is helpful. What is really helpful for birds, bird nest detection, is a laser distance sensor, because you can locate positions in the field without standing exactly above the point. Of course, very helpful is also water resistance and wind resistance of standard and always available nowadays. I think is a long flight time of half an hour and more. And of course, the option that the drone can fly mapping missions automatically, so you don't have to worry how to control your drone. Then I switch over to the use cases I want to present. And the first use case is meadowbird protection. I have there are different use cases from northern Germany, which I somehow mix up to give you an overview. Well, yeah, no, okay. So, and when you have this bird meadow protection, then you have two basic ways you use the drone. The first one is a complete field survey, as shown by Frank, which you will apply when you know you have a large area where are several nests and you want to search for them. So then you perform a mapping mission, and the other one is a spot survey, where it's already known where the approximate or position of the nest is. So you only fly to this spot and find this single nest. And an example for that is, for example, the protection of the montagoose harrier in northern Germany, where you have large areas which you could not survey with a mapping mission, but you need some information where the nest is. The abundance of the animals is very, very low. They are, almost no of them are left. So the NGO, which is monitoring them and protecting them, finds about 30 nests a year over a very, very large area of half a federal state. And to do so, they are working together with volunteers who will monitor the areas around them. And if they see a montagoose harrier, they look into it even more and look for food transfer, whether they see a food transfer, and then they can say something about the approximate nest location, or at least the field or meadow where the nest is located. And the volunteers will then record this approximate position using our app. And this position will then be transferred to the drone team. And the drone team uses this with our software for the drone to locate this nest. It has then on a map and also in the image a marker where where the drone team can see there's approximately the nest, and it can fly to this point and survey the area around this point. And for montagoose harrier, that's normally, if it's a field, very easy, because you can very clearly see the nest. So then they perform the flight, and then they get the correct nest position or accurate nest position, and they can transfer it into the app again to walk there with the smartphone and do the protection, or to transfer the data in a GIS system. So here's an example how such a nest looks. And this is a case when you have this fields, then it's really easy. And this image was there where I was using in the beginning of the time in 2017. I didn't have a thermal imaging drone, so I was using a normal RGB drone. And for this wheat meadow fields, it's very easy. It gets more complicated if you have meadows. In meadows, it's complicated, but in the other, it's very easy. And they use the drone also not only to find the nest position, but also the number of eggs and to monitor the breeding success and the number of chicks, etc. The next example is when you do the whole area map as a mapping of a whole field or a whole area. And this is an example of the Michael Otto Institute, an research institute of the German NGO NABU. And the background is they have a large area where they do integrated meadow breeding bird conservation. So it's 14,600 hectares of agricultural area. And they monitor a lot of these areas and fly there to find different species, such as lapwing and European curlew, etc. And they search them with the drone and then do protection measures such as fences, etc. So there the typical challenges are you have very, very large areas like this one, which you have to map and to search for all the nests in the area. You have breeding and non-breeding birds. So it's you not only need to find a hotspot, but you also need to verify whether it's a breeding bird or not. And you have water bodies and fog, and you have also a time limitation because of the sun. Some examples of these challenges. This is a water body where you have the heat from the day before stored in the water body. And as you can see, the nest of the lapwing here in the red circle is almost, you cannot see it. It's very hard compared to an area where there is not a water body and no stored heat. It's where the contrast is far higher and it's easier. So that's an issue you have to work with. Then the other issue is probably fog, especially if you are in wetlands or you're also in trained wetlands. You have a lot of fog, as you can see here. And this fog deteriorates your image, so the sharpness goes down and it's harder to detect the animals. Then you have sunlight, and here's an example for the detection of a European curlew for different times in the day. And as you can see in the beginning, you have a not so sharp image because you have the fog, and it's the sharpest image is after sunrise when it's 8 o'clock, and then you have a very clear image where you can see the nest very good. And then it starts when the heating up of the area, it starts to getting harder to identify the nest. And when you look at noon, then the problem is that it's not that the nest is not there, but there are so many other things which makes it hard to detect it. And here you can see also an example of our image algorithms. So the blue surrounding one is the standard DJI image, and if you apply our image algorithm, then it's at least possible to detect the nests in the image. So the workflow for this kind of work with our software is that we first perform a mapping flight to collect a lot of image data from the whole field. We analyze this image data in our desktop software, Poise Studio, so the thermal image data. Then we get burst out of Poise Studio, we get bird nest locations, and we can transfer them either in our app and walk there with the smartphone and verify that it is a nest, or which I would prefer because of this problem with the breeding and non-breeding birds, you transfer this data into your remote controller and you do another flight. And the nice thing is of the second flight is that non-breeding birds will move. So you have a very easy way to verify where are the non-breeding birds and where are the breeding birds. So, and if you do not do this two-flight approach, you can of course do this live view approach where you fly and you stop and you look whether what you see there, and you maybe have a color image. But the problem is you will spend a lot of time to identify whether it's a breeding bird or not a breeding bird. So this helps a lot to reduce the flight time over the area, thereby enabling systematic search so that you do not miss points. And if you have less flight time, then you also have less disturbance. I don't know the time. I have to look at the time. But it's okay. So to come back to the disturbance, I have here an example which is from a published paper, not from someone else. But if you look at these graphs, then you can see such an UAV flight does have an impact, and it causes disturbance for the birds. And this disturbance, when they measured what they did here, was they measured the heart rate of the birds in the nest. So they applied a stethoscope with a microphone, and they measured the heart rate of the birds. And what you can see, that the ratio of the heart beat raises approximately in the same way as if a bird of prey would fly over the nest. So it's a disturbance, but when you fly 50 meters or 40 meters above the nest, one has also have to say the disturbance is limited, and if you use a good method, then this disturbance is only 2 minutes per hectare, so it's not too high. So well, I skipped this, I think, or no. So when you search for these birds, which are relatively large but not too large, I would say that the flight altitude, which is optimum, is 40 meters above ground level, and you fly with about 4 meters per second, then you can very nicely identify lapwings and curlews, etc. And you also have enough information into the image to do an interpretation and also to use it later for artificial intelligence. In the example, they use the drone to first identify the nest, then to verify the number of eggs. That's always a big question also for building the fence, whether I don't know the name, the Gelege, the number of eggs are full or whether the bird is still laying eggs. Then, of course, they verify whether the hatching has happened, and during the mowing, they save the chicks during the mowing operation. So there's a lot of work for the drone, and it's very hard to imagine what they did before the drone. So there was even more work, but with the drone, it's still a lot of work. So now I want to do a short excursus to some other things we did, or no, I supported. I did not do it. I only did a small part in it, but it was fun. So that's I have a cooperation with Binco, especially with Tim van Berkel, which is also situated in UK. And this is an example where they tried to detect bonobo nests in a tropical rainforest canopy in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And yeah, it's also a project sponsored by the Worldwide Fund of Nature. And they try to establish a sustainable tourism scheme inside a community managed forestry there. And the question was, is it possible to detect bonobo nests within the canopy? It's only a short excursus, but as you can see, when you use the normal drone image in live view, it's relatively hard to detect those nests. But if you use advanced algorithms, then you can clearly detect those nests in the canopy. And what is also interesting, also if you are working in the field of research, that there is this difference between the image the drone displays on your controller and also the drone records as video compared to the radiometric image, which contains all the data on the sensor. And so our software uses this radiometric image data, and this image data is not significantly different to any. So all cameras, you can use any camera, and the radiometric data looks almost the same. Whereas the difference of this non-radiometric data is huge. So if you have the previous model of these DJI drones, it looks totally different from the current one. So if you're working on longer time spans to develop something, you cannot rely on this thing which is changing with every generation. The next example also with Binco or from Binco is an example of hog deer detection in Cambodia. That's also the question, is a red or an endangered species which was already extinct but rediscovered there. And it's a nice example of a combination where you combine thermal imaging data, photo traps, camera traps, and also knowledge about the habitat and behavior of the animals, where they move on which time of the day. I think I will skip it for the sake of time a little bit, but there's also a nice report coming up from Binco. So they did a lot of looking into the habitat there, did habitat mapping with multispectral imaging camera drones, and combined that with the thermal imaging. That's also I just do a quick thing here. So what Frank said, so there's a lot of information also in these images, even though they are relatively low resolution. And what you can see here, you have a typical shape of the hog deer and a totally different shape of this pig. And with some experience, you can learn to distinguish him. What you cannot distinguish is different kinds of deers, in this case, deer species. So there you need to rely on other methods, and there they came in with the camera traps, but yeah. So, and what you also can, or what you can learn here is that you get a lot of image data, and all this image data, to analyze all this image data manually is a lot of effort, and therefore bringing in artificial intelligence is of course the way to go. Our software already has a AI model included, and if you look at the bird surveying, it detects about 7 to 8 in 10 nests, which is not too bad, but it cannot yet distinguish species. And it's, yeah, there's still a lot of development because, yeah, to be done. We also offer, or the software also offers the possibility to use your own AI models, which is nice that then you can train your own AI models, collect the data, label the data, and train it. And yeah, we are working in the different projects always to collect the image data, to train the models, so that we can improve and have one day soon a software package which yeah, reduces the workload even more than it does up to now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tobias. Thank you to both speakers for those really interesting talks. So we've had a few questions come in now, so I'll just go through them in order and sort of throw them open to Frank and Tobias. So the first one is from Graham Osborne from Severn Trent, asking, do you, I think this relates to Frank's talk, do you geotag or GPS the fawn location so you can return the fawn, or how do you reduce the risk of predation once the grass has been cut short?
The mother, so the deer, leads them away. So they very soon move into another meadow or forested area. So it happens quite quickly if the humans stay away. So we sometimes have trouble actually with humans who observe this and don't trust that the mother comes back and leads the fawn away. This, of course, keeps the mother away. So you to a certain point you have to trust that everything works fine. And if you recall their call, and it reaches very far, so they usually manage to get together again, and then she takes care.
And Frank, just another one about the fawn rescue, just asking anonymous question about the landowner's role and what kind of motivation there might be for landowners to pay the cost of fawn rescue, or how is
actually,
it funded?
it's like most of the things I do, it's voluntary usually. So there are usually there are hardly any costs. But even if there were costs, the farmer, the person who poses the risk to the animal is responsible to mitigate the risk. And it's also a legal aspect, which in the past was not often enforced. But we see increasing intention from lawmakers and law enforcement. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm also.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm also seeing a change, so that from the beginning when I started to do this work, there was very low readiness to pay anything, and it is really changing. So a lot of farmers and hunters are now ready to pay for the drone service. And very interestingly, I think, is the change of the introduction of these Accra robots. I don't know what it's the correct term, but these robots driving on the fields, somehow automatic and autonomously. They, if they kill or harm an animal, then always the manufacturer is somehow part of the problem. And there's a large motivation or a huge motivation to solve this issue from this point.
Thank you very much. And there's a few questions about the sort of software element, Tobias, for POI. So we've got a question asking, I'll put these together. Firstly, is there a UK equivalent of the POI cloud that you're aware of? And also, and I think you touched on this at the end, how much work is involved in setting up the algorithms to detect specific species, and asking if, assuming the algorithm is different for birds, bonobos, hog deer, etc.
Yeah, so we are current. So I'm not aware of a alternative. Of course, we offer the system worldwide. We are a little bit. We are small companies. So we are we're working on implementation in different languages, but most of the software is so at least POI Studio is available in a different language, and the other ones are ready to translate. So there's the option to use it in UK. For setting up the detection or artificial intelligence models, the first step is that you need a lot of training data. So you need to collect, starting with 1,000 or better several thousand images which are labeled, and then the training as such is not that complicated, and we are always happy to somehow cooperate. So with most of our clients, they collect data for us, and we help them to train the model and integrate it. So if there is, so we are working now with, I don't know, 10 different organizations in, for bird species protection in Germany to collect image data. And we are always happy to somehow support and cooperate.
Thank you. And we're kind of just on time now, so I don't want to keep people much longer. There's a couple of other questions we haven't managed to get to, but I think we might be able to just use another minute or so. So I'll put a couple of questions together. So one is, what's the smallest mammal that this technique can be used on? And there's also been a question about whether squirrel drays, so they're squirrel nests within trees, whether they can be detected. And there's just a couple of questions about the deer study. And I'll make sure that there's a link to that paper that Frank mentioned, shared, the DOI for that. So in terms of animal size.
So yeah, the resolution is always a question of image resolution, or one aspect is image resolution, and you can achieve higher image resolution and detect smaller animals if you fly lower or you have a better resolution camera. Therefore, I'm looking forward for this new camera. When you detect nests in trees, there's always the problem that you have the leaves. So it's easier in winter time. There's also the contrast, temperature difference is higher. I have experienced that we can detect birds in trees, but I do not know whether we can detect this. You would have to test it. Yeah, interesting question, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think we'll have to finish there. Sorry if we didn't get to your question, but some of those questions I saw might be answered with sharing around the document that Frank talked about, the paper, and the presentation itself will be shared with all attendees. So you'll be able to look back over slides if there's anything you wanted to clear, or links to reports that have been included. So yeah, it just remains to say thank you very much to Frank and Tobias for calling in over from Germany and sharing your kind of experiences and expertise with us over here in the UK. And thank you everyone for giving us your time during your lunch hour. And yeah, thank you very much, and we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you for the possibility.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, good. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.